Good morning. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Just checking my sound is on. My name is Iain McGregor. I'm from Edinburgh Napier University, and I'm going to be talking about acoustics versus psychoacoustics in mixed reality. So what we have here, I meant to remind everyone at the start that we're recording this session for later going up on YouTube. And I'll be talking for about 50 minutes, but please type as many questions as you want in the chat and I'll answer them at the end. And also please feel free to, once we've finished, to 50 minutes to ask as many questions as you like. I'd be delighted to answer them. If I don't answer your question in time within the hour, my email address is on the final slide. It's i.mcgregor@napier.ac.uk. And my telephone number is 01314552788 if anyone would like to contact me. So my main focus of research is blurred reality. So any sound anywhere is what I'm going for. I'm talking to the converted here, despite what people would say that we're a visually centered culture, we're very much an auditory centered culture, which is why we have a very rich language for describing what we can see, because there's a lot of difference amongst people. Yeah, I know we have difference in hearing abilities, but we're a much greater shared experience, which is why in many languages there's a paucity of words to describe what you're listening to, because you don't need to describe what you're listening to. The shared experience is much similar. And in terms of mixed reality or augmented reality in sound, we've been doing that for considerably longer. One of the arguments about the cave paintings is that it was actually an early form of animation with sound effects, with idiophones and various other acoustically perfect spaces for these events to take place. But in terms of technology, we're very used to having our worlds augmented in terms of sound. So we've got the telephone, Meucci from 1871, recording from Cross 1877, the radio 1896, audiobooks 1932, the GPS navigation 1992, podcasts from 2000, the voice assistants from 2011, and the smart speakers from 2014. So we're very comfortable with having our auditory world extended, augmented. In terms of spatialization, stereo goes all the way back to 1881. Quad we've got in 1969, binaurals 1972, and we've got ambisonics from 1975. So these spatial techniques are incredibly long-lived. I haven't bothered to put Atmos and various other more modern technologies. The surround sound has obviously quad is sufficient. So in the work that I do, very much focuses around the difference between the sound field and the soundscape. So with students, I talk about the tree falling in the forest and no living being there to hear it, and then use that as the example of that difference. So sound field representing acoustics. So we've got the auditory environment surrounding the sound source. This is the approach I'm taking. I know there's a lot of other people who take a very different approach, but it's the quantitative measurements, the things that can have numbers associated with them. I know in soundscapes, when we describe them, we can apply numbers to them, but there's usually an interpretation listener involved. Whereas the soundscape is that unique experience for the auditory environment within which a listener is immersed. Okay, so very much an individual experience. And the approach that I take is very much qualitative, so it's descriptions and classifications. So you're all aware of the different, there's peculiarities with listening, a specific distance tendency, where sounds appear closer or further away, usually about the 1.5 meter, but that varies for individuals, of course. Obvious cone of confusion, the front-back confusion, the equal loudness contours, Fletcher-Munson curves that we've got here on the right. I find this amazing that the people mixing content really don't comprehend this or don't apply it. Maybe they do comprehend it, but don't apply it. So that's something we focus on a lot in our work. Then we've got the loudness being relative versus SPL being absolute. And then you've got the pitch versus frequency. So if it's above 2 kilohertz, the pitch obviously goes higher. Where it's below as increased loudness, but below 2 kilohertz, it obviously perceived as lower with increased loudness. And again, there's a lot of variation, but it's a general trend. And then we've got this habituation, spontaneous recovery, dishabituation that's going on with what we're attaining to in the world. And as a designer, we use a lot of entrainment, there's echolocation, suppression, and so on. Right, so I work on the reality-virtuality continuum, and this is adapted from Milgram, Takamura, Utsumi, and Kishino in 1995. And the HRI actually stands for human-robot interaction, which is an area that I work in. Then we've got, so that's the human-robot interaction. Then we've got augmented reality, augmented virtuality, and VR off on the right-hand side, and going between those. So I don't talk about reality on the left-hand side and VR, virtual reality on the right-hand side. I'm very much talking about human-robots interaction on the left-hand side. Okay, so sound, an obvious concern is privacy. Okay, so we've got that general approach of whether we're using speakers versus headphones. So how much privacy do we want? I remember Michael Bull writing about the Walkman generation, which I'm part of, using the Walkmans to create their own films, their own movie score as they live through life. Okay. So when we're interacting with devices, are we using headphones or loudspeakers? Is it a private situation or a public situation? So identifying what's going on in the environment and the hardware that's being used. Are the people using this for isolation? Are they masking the outside world? Or are we going to use phase interference when isolation is not possible? Like is done in upmarket restaurants, and you're deliberately piping in other people talking around you. So it's out of phase and gives you a little bit more privacy. Then we've got issues about the personalization, the customization that we want. So we can use the wisdom of crowds, cookies, others purchase type approach on group profiling, or we can have personal sensitivities. I'm a big fan of tracking what people do in terms of the volume and mute, because that can tell you an awful lot about what's going on. Then we've got, do we want to use the sound for health apps, for monitoring, medication reminders, those type of things? And that, depending on the design of the reproduction devices, that can tell other people an awful lot of what's going on in your life through these reminders. So we've got to keep that in mind, because even when you think that, no, this is coming through headphones and a quiet environment, I'm just going to hear this, very often people do. Then we've got the data input, that old cliche of when, I don't know if it's apocryphal or not. I think it actually happened. The ATMs having pitched keys and people learning what the keys were. Certainly on phones, people were learning numbers that way. And then the skills, the privacy. In certain cultures, failure is something that people do not want to admit, even if it's just in entering a PIN. So we've got that whole privacy of failure versus achievement. And then there's the announcements. You can call his name coming through, the Sonic Association, biohazard nuclear alarm. I remember watching a television program, and one of the main characters, their mother was set to a biohazard alarm when it came through, which was as a joke, but also communicates to others how you feel about somebody. One of the anomalies in life, which you're all familiar with, is whispers drawing attention due to the enhanced presence frequency. So nothing private in that at all. And generally, if something is really important but needs to be private, we need to use those regular patterns that are easy for others to ignore, so that they're not aware of what's going on. Hearing damage. Everyone knows about this in this group, okay? And there's that convention of clarity equals high volume, which is complete hokum, hence the the symbol I put between the two. In our research, there's obviously, we're trying to do no harm. Sirens, 120, 130 dBs, in some cases louder. So much to my surprise, when I was researching this for the project, 45% of emergency medical staff, medical service staff, firefighters have mild to moderate hearing loss. It's a huge number. The alert volume separate from the listening volume. This is quite common in some devices. The limiter is typically not applied to alerts, and users often are unaware of the difference. So going through this just now, because it's always at the back of my mind in what we're doing when we're augmenting things. And the real world obviously can easily get up to 130 dBs, whereas we have to work within this quieter world to be ethical. And then we've got the cinema sound effects, typical 70 to 105 dBs. But in films, there have been cases of 130 dBs recorded in different studies. And we've also got this problem with low frequencies easily masking the high frequencies, so people turn things up or apply a modification to that, whether using a hearing aid or with the Sony and Apple trying to go to the market of using their earbuds instead of hearing aids. Then this approach causes very obvious problems. And amplitude, very commonly overcoming intentional deafness. And in the building that I work in, we have these horn fire alarms at just above ear height, producing excessive sounds. And they're obviously designed to be quite high up in the air with long throws, but they're right next to the doors that you walk past, and myself and many other people trying to negotiate fire, not just fire drills, but we actually have had fires in my building, and actually having to go through covering our ears as we go. So noise pollution in general, we've got that listening ear fatigue going on there, and that increased cognitive load that goes along with it. Misophonia, most people underestimate that. Terms that, so it's an estimated 20% of the population. Again, probably all of us already. So chewing, eating, 81%. And predominantly human interactions, but also alert sounds can fall into that. And there we've got that fight or flight, depending on the individual. Okay. One area that I work in is ecoacoustics, and we're looking at the impact upon nature. And there's obvious studies where birds often using higher pitch to avoid being masked. And the really funny ones, but not for the starlings, the starlings themselves imitating ringtones, struct reversing, car alarms, those type of things. So general approaches, we're designing minimum amplitude, duration, and bandwidth. Just so. Now, the accessibility. So according to the World Health Organization, about 15% of the world's population have some form of disability. Hearing impairment between 6 to 19 is estimated 14.9%. Below that, it's incredibly difficult to measure. You don't know if it's inattention for some other reason or they're not hearing something. Then we've got the presbyacusis or presbyacusis, the ISO standard, and age-related hearing loss. And we can see that on the right here. And if we consider that all adults, that's above 19 years old, represent 71% of the world's population, and that we can see that these baseline, this is in hearing loss, even at 20 years old, we're getting a level. And obviously this is different from male and female, but we can see that as we're aging, as everyone is aware of in this chat, we're losing this. But we still have this standard, this gold standard of flat frequency response. And if you have an hearing impairment, then get hearing aids rather than actually designing out for it. Okay, so visual impairment, 2.2 billion have some form of visual impairment, 29% of the world's population. Moderate to severe, so fortunately considered to be lower at 3%, and blind at 0.5%. And pretty much all on their first drafts are taking over the auditory channel, which pretty much everyone that I've come across who falls into that blind category dislikes with intensity. So please don't isolate us from the world. Then we've also got mobility and physical impairments, spinal cord impairments, head injuries, cognitive and learning impairments, psychological disorders, and invisible impairments. So there's lots of issues which sound can considerably help with. So I will get onto the projects eventually. I'm just talking about the underpinnings here. So emotional engagement. Okay. So sound, as everyone is aware of, we can have effective audio. It's very much the norm. So evoking emotions, it's a very natural thing to do with sound and to experience. So we've got the physical, the psychoacoustic, the psychological dimensions. So we've got the valency, the pleasant versus the unpleasant, the attractive versus the perverse. We've got the arousal in terms of intense and mild, or high or low. We've got everything dependent upon perceived relevance. Sound itself, again, as you all know, is memory. Short-term memory, matching it to what we've already experienced. And so we've got individual interpretations of it and individual meanings for us, which varies during the day and according to life events and the groups that we're in. So we can affect quality judgments. We've got positive, high quality, negative, low quality. Everyone's familiar with the car door slams, about closest to give you confidence that you're not going to fall out when you're driving, but also about the relative quality of the cars in that the salespeople are trying to sell. Okay, some sounds absolutely need to be unpleasant for safety reasons. We don't want them to continue. And then there's the proportionality. So in the medical industry, the crying wolf is a huge deal. So many alarms are ignored, and so many staff talk about emotional exhaustion, fatigue, and there's some brilliant work trying to solve this. But unfortunately, they also have to fight with the please don't make us learn any more sounds. So we've got to get the proportionality right. And then there's pollution. Again, in medical situation, this is really common. There's the unintended recipients, people who are not intended to be part of that communication, which visitors, hospital visitors, fall into that. And nurses spend a lot of their time explaining what a sound means to understandably nervous visitors. And within patients itself, very much anxiety inducing, but it's not just confined to hospitals. This happens in many environments. So intellectual engagement we're also interested in, and we talk about a lot of the time the cognitive load. Okay, all listening involves working memory, and it's one of the reasons, thought to be one of the reasons why when hearing declines and people with early stage dementia or some other similar condition that appears to accelerate whereas if they have working hearing aids or compensatory matters have been taken care of, then the decline is not as fast. Anyway, so it's intrinsic, it's extraneous, it's germane, and what we're interested in those aspects. And there's also inattentional deafness when you have to focus on something else and you can't cope with anything else. There's cognitive hijacking. We're in Edinburgh, where I live. Walk past any of these horrible Highland shops selling wigs with hats on them, and you get this blast of Scottish music and blasting out the door. It's actually illegal in the city, but it still happens. Got the branding. The intention, obviously, to drawing users back into the product, and you've got these addictive features, very prominent in mobile devices, and they're very ethically problematic. We've got basically they're akin to gambling, and not akin to gambling, but that positive reinforcement, the addictive nature of that. So the cognitive, the inattentive blindness, focusing on one task, expensive stimuli, and you get the auditory exclusion, where you exclude other effectors. And ideally, we want to work with a selective attention, so that we're guiding attention. That's what good film mixers do, all mixers do. And then we've got the efficacy, the classic ear cons versus auditory icons, having to learn something versus it being already understood from past experience. Right, onto the projects now. So CMAR, this is crowd management through audio augmented reality. So doing that with David Monteith, a sound design MSc student, started in 2022 and still ongoing. It's a mobile app, e-ticket, and it's a pre-show custom audio guide linked to the event to capture interest. And we've got, it's for a particular event at the top of the Royal Mile. And what we're doing is we've got problems with the number of people who can enter at any particular time. Okay, this is a limited access point. So it's a staggered ingress. So we use a turn-by-turn navigation to optimize the circulation, but it's hidden as immersive theatre. So we're very lucky on the high street, there's this rich history, and depending on somebody's mobility and when their entrance time is, but which also varies in real time, can be brought forward, pushed back. We use a mixture of dialogue, music and sound effects to capture their interest as a form of immersive theatre. And as I said, it's adaptive based on the proximity and the managed traffic flow. And we're basically using the principles from video games. We're going forward, backwards in timelines, and we've marked it up so that hopefully it's seamless. But it's overlaid onto the existing world so that people can still talk to each other, they can still hear the sounds that are around them, they can still hear the buzz of other people. They're not acoustically isolated. Then we move on to AMBLE. This is adaptive mixing for a personalized listening experience. This is with Ahmed Shalabi. As a PhD research student, I'm a supervisor and with Dr. Linda Shore. I'm the supervisor for the previous project as well, and that's from 2021 to present. And this is an object-based approach to remixing stems at the playback renderer. So when it does not affect the original mix that you would experience in the cinema, we're using it more for streaming services. So we're using DSP, compression, expansion, EQ, noise reduction, spatialization, and so on, tracking the objects. And we're tracking user action. So did they rewind? Did they put the volume up, down, subtitles on? We're making use of the monitor background levels with the always-on mic. So whether that's built into your remote control or your smartphone or your smart earbuds, your hearables. And the emphasis is always on protecting hearing. And we're also compensating for poor reproduction technologies and playback hardware, so that so basically wherever you are, if you start a film on one device and move across to that, it's always optimized for you. So that no matter how poor the listening environments are, you're getting a clearer experience. And it's entirely independent of speaker types and the layout. Next project we're working on is part of the Carousel project, which is a Horizon 2020 grant. This is Stephen McSeveny, a PhD research student, and his supervisor is Professor Kenny Mitchell, Dr. Bavis Coniaris, and myself, and it's been going from 2022 to present. And so it's embodied on my next hour dancing and partying with the help of digital characters. And it's about real world social and physical AI for an internet of feelings and emotions. So one of the things we're looking at is selective auditory attention to enhance immersion, amongst other aspects, of course. So we're trying to maximize engagement and minimize loneliness and have a natural auditory interaction with other users, avatars, and AIs, and try and make it seamless between those. And it's a case of, not just in this project, but in other projects as well, that we're trying to reverse the aging process of hearing, so that when you're augmenting your environment, it is considerably better than the acoustic world. So that it is that hyper reality that people have become familiar with in terms of media content, we're wanting to continue us through so that it's even better in augmented or mixed reality or virtual reality than you would experience in the physical world. All right, another PhD student here, Risavka. So that's a relative experience and selective attention in video game audio. This is with Ethan Robson. He's a PhD research student here at Edinburgh Napier. I'm a supervisor, Dr. Valentino Di Donato, and it's the second supervisor, Dr. John McGowan is the third supervisor. It's been running since 2022. And we're looking at auditory selective attention to improve gaming experiences, so that your relative experience correlates with what to attend to. So we're guiding them so that if you are really in the zone auditorily, it sounds like you're in the zone. If you are a novice and you would experience the sounds and not know what to listen to, then that's what we go for. So we're doing lots of concurrent verbalizations, speak alouds. So that person does what they're going to do, whether it's in the virtual world or the physical world. If we record it, we then get them to come back and talk about what they were attending to at that particular time. So it's an adaptive sound system linked to players' abilities over time rather than how they're performing at any specific time within the game. And we're trying to look at immersive variation to increase engagement, and very much for cross-reality applications. Right, we're back to a recent MSc project just now. This is with Alan Elliott from Seneca College in Canada. And it's from 2022 to present. We're writing this up just now and hope and intend to continue with it. And we're looking at spatialized auditory signals. So we've got a combination of auditory icons, earcons, sonification, speech going on there. And this is to help firefighters to locate down firefighters, where the fire hose is, where the safe exits are, unidentified persons are, unidentified person behind a wall. And that's what we're working on just now, but there's a considerably longer list for locating objects. Then there's the danger. So if there's an impending flashover, there's an unsafe area, so this, or a ceiling or a floor or wall, communicating that sonically. And there's also personal information such as orientation. Okay, so if any individual firefighter's vital signs are approaching danger levels, such as breathing, heart rate, mobility, disorientation, temperature, and so on. So that's communicated to you as an individual, because you very often are not aware of that. Then there's the rescue information status of a downed firefighter. Okay, what's their air level? What's their mask integrity? What's their mobility? Their potential mobility and the vital signs, so that you know whether it's safe to leave them for another minute or two to shore something up, or you really need to get them out now. And then lastly, the water supply. So the availability of water, where it is, the pressure, and the pump operational status. Okay, so what's going on in terms of that? So that's ongoing work in that respect. Next project is SOVRA. And this is subjective orientation in VR audio. And this is Dr. Julian Villegas from the University of ISU, and 2022 to present. Ethan Robson is also helping out on this. And so how could listeners' experiences of auditory spatial orientation in VR be captured? So it's a way of capturing their experiences. So they're wearing an HMD and headphones. Listeners indicate a sound's orientation and location. And we're looking at the effectiveness of existing HDRFs, and with the intention of developing effective approaches for communicating auditory spatial cues, especially when it comes to moving sounds. And we can use this to identify the best match within HRTF databases, as well as to start to generate new HRTFs for individuals. This is my pet project here. It's called Sheer Sound. It's a patent. A patent's already been applied for, and so we're now in that year stage where we can update it. And what we do is we use head tracking, or it can be a hearable, or we can use a webcam for the head tracking. And we present audio signals in real-world environments in order to create an extended audiogram. I'm being a little bit vague about this until the patent's finally out the other end for obvious reasons. And the intention is to enhance clarity, to go well beyond the upper range and pull out more notches within that, so we can actually be much more precise in what we're amplifying. But it's intended to minimize hearing damage, so that you're not amplifying in areas that just have narrow notches, but show up as being lower, less sensitive than they actually are. And also to obviously allow for Fletcher-Munson curves. So it compensates for the reproduction hardware variation, which is quite dramatic in terms of what people use. There's also personal preference. So at the very end, we asked people, again, to move their head to give us an indication of what the perfect setting for them, certainly in Canada, I'm presuming the same in the UK. There's a big problem with hearing aids being in people's drawers, in that they get the perfect calibration for them. It then sounds too bright, they don't like it, it's too harsh, it gets put in the drawer and never used. So this way we can dial it up or down as they need it. As I said, we've got compensation for levels of listening, for presbycusis, so that you can update it as you're going along rather than having to go for an audiogram. Helps compensate for masking, so you could deliberately use the system in a very noisy environment, so you can compensate for that. And so very often the perfect sound, what would sound clear in a noisy environment, sounds absolutely horrendous in a quiet environment. And we can set up multiple profiles that adapt according to as you move from environment to environment. Right, robotics, I mentioned I'd talk about that. This is a project I'm working with Dr. Yan Yu and Andreas Koka. We started this in 2022, still ongoing. And we're very interested in companion colleague servant. Okay. So this is innovative, potential personality-driven human-robot cooperation. And we start with nominative determinism. We ask the user to provide the robot with a name, and from that we can get a good start on gender, age, ethnicity, personality traits. If they call it the model of the robot, then they're very much interested in it's a piece of tech. Whereas if you give it a pet name, then they're probably going to want it to be a bit more of a companion. And it also helps with gender issues. Now, there's obvious names which can be both male or female, but there are many names that are more obviously male or female, and that, again, helps with that aspect. And we're using a hierarchy ranking framework. So the auditory solutions are regularly updated for each user according to their interactions. Okay. And there's a multimodal framework to track the human personality traits with adaptable robot personality traits to improve the human levels of comfort. So if somebody wants to treat it like a servant, then the personality pretty much goes right to the back, and it is just a pure machine. Whereas if somebody wants to be a companion or move between these phases, which is what we expect, then that personality will change. And there have been studies that suggest that the robot personality affects the human task motivation and level of engagement. So we're trying to get a better match for this. And it's effectively a task-oriented conversational agent for human-robot interaction. Right, another project that we're working on, this is with Dr. Rod Selfridge, 2022 to present, and it's a sound map. So it's where and when women feel harassed or intimidated. And it's very much an underreported occurrence. And we're looking at having people, when they're using it, being guided through to areas where women feel happy and safe. So it's a mobile technology, and women anonymously indicate feelings about location and why. I thank you for that question. I'll make sure I come back to that at the end. And it allows others to empathize, hopefully, and hopefully even more importantly, used to drive social change and to educate and enlighten others to improve shared city spaces. And it will very much be an opt-in and massive ethical issues that we're in the stage of discussing and proposing possible solutions for. Right, so Marn, let's see if I can get rid of this. Oh, I want to, sorry. So Marn is, if I can get rid of this, museum audio augmented reality. Whoops. And so it's an integrated virtual ticket, with Dr. Ingi Helgeson and Dr. Ingi. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce Ingi's second name at the moment because I can't see it. We're starting this next year, 2023, and it's an integrated virtual ticket. So it's open ear linked to smartphone. That's the accelerometer, gyroscope, magnetometer. We're interested in these aspects. I'm using Wi-Fi beacons as well as ultrasound within the buildings, and it's designed to maximize venue capacity. So the time arrivals according to the occupancy levels, and to try and encourage exploration, because museums, just like many other venues, have a real problem with people going to the same locations over and over again and missing out a lot of things that are potentially very popular but less popular just by share of where their location are. And what we're trying to do is to time the arrivals within the venue according to occupancy levels. So you get guided so that you do end up where you want to be, but when it's quieter. And it's a recommender system, so encouraging exploration recommended system based on dwell time, orientation, and custom content using volume changes, skip, repeat, with sonic breadcrumbs, so things that you've been interested in, would sort of let you hear from a distance in the correct spatial orientation. And so the optimum route is calculated according to physical abilities. Now this is an opt-in thing, so it's a gate measurement, but it's kept local on the device. So in this particular museum, the Chambers Street Museum in Edinburgh, we can see that we've got very definite built-around stairs, which are lovely to walk up, but not everyone is able or wants to do that. So we've got lifts, we've got escalators, and so on. But the lift capacity is very low, as is the escalators, whereas the stair capacity is very high. So what this does is your recommender is based on how you're walking. Have you got a buggy, you're limping, tired, and so on. Okay. And then there's the shared mode. And what we're looking at there is time shifting in and out of sync according to the proximity of the party that you're with. So you really are getting a shared experience rather than the classical approach with everyone's got something slammed to their ear, listening to one thing and totally isolated from each other and not having a shared experience at all. Right, this is HAR and Hospital Audio Augmented Reality. And this is from 2023 onwards. And we're still looking for partners for this. And we're looking at distinct user groups. That's staff, patients, and visitors. Okay. As I mentioned before, staff waste a considerable amount of time explaining the meaning of alert sounds. One particular nurse was struck off the register for silencing an alarm. Quite a few studies about sleep deprivation impeding recovery. Incredibly little privacy in a hospital. And the approach we're looking at is auditory augmented reality for monitoring by staff. And that alarms are only audible to the wider world if they've gone unheard by staff. And one study we did last year, we're using the Doppler effect for concurrent alarms in the same ward. And what the paper did was that we looked at the relative perceived importance of sounds based upon the Doppler effect. And the thinking behind that is parents and people in general spend a lot of time paying attention to what's coming towards you, because that's more likely to hurt you than something that's going away from you. So, and we always, I always remember whenever I go to country that the driving's on the opposite side of the road, that I get that nervousness the first time I'm almost knocked over because I've stopped paying attention to it, at which point for the rest of the holiday I very am reminded to pay attention to the Doppler effect. So what we've got there is, if you're standing in front of 3 alarms, and they're set to different status, one which is I'm on, but I need to be on, I need to make a sound because I'm legally required to do so. Then we have Doppler down. going on that. So it gives the auditory illusion that that's less important. If it's on but does need to be paid attention, but nothing's urgent at the moment, then it's the normal sound, no Doppler effect at all. If it's urgent, then we've got Doppler up, so going quiet and loud and up in pitch as well. And we can vary that differences as we go on. The advantage of having that system is that we can have all three running at the same time to make it easier to work out which one's important, because you have those gaps when something goes from quiet to loud or loud to quiet, as well as the normal ones. And with highly reflective surfaces and a chat room full of acousticians, nobody needs to explain to any of you how difficult it can be to orientate yourself and to work out where a sound is coming from. We're also looking at acoustic curtains for patient privacy. And this is active noise cancellation and passive approaches in there, because it's really normal, like to have wards or rooms next to each other, which typically the doors are all open so that people can hear the alerts. And what happens is a lot of patients hear each other, hear the diagnoses, but behind closed curtains, supposedly, and that increases stress levels. So you've got the common privacy, as well as not wanting to upset people with overly concerned people with parts of the condition that they might not yet have be experiencing, but could possibly happen to them. Then we're looking at the virtual open window, taking a nice part of the hospital and pumping the sounds from that into the environments when masking is required, and also personal acoustic bubbles, so that setting that up so that you have an area where whether it's the ultrasonic type speakers, so that within your bed you're hearing certain things quietly, and the acoustic curtains where we can't do the active noise cancellation but you want to have some privacy, then these personal acoustic bubbles would then create, whether it's the virtual open window or their own content, TV, whatever they're watching or listening to, help solve that. But we can see in here that typical levels in here: pneumatic tubes 74, 78 dBs, telephone 55 to 61, pagers are still, though it really annoys me in this diagram that the bell is lowercase, but anyway, a patient monitor 65, conversations and so on. So a lot to cope with. The actual physical space, the way we do a lot of this work, is it's called the Auralisation suite. C71A, C72 is the, I finally worked out how to do that. Took me too long. There we go. Sorry. All right. Science Research Investment Fund, a SRIF, we've got £50,000 for it back in 2006. And it's a 28.4 channel surround sound room, which is capable of 3.2 kilowatts output. These are 48 channel IO, 24-bit, 192 kilohertz, Avid system, Pro Tools Ultimate, symmetric halo spectra FU, and we have binaural and ambisonics microphones to go out and capture auditory environments. And what we're doing is we're very much reproducing we're virtually recreating auditory environments in that space, vehicle interiors, computing center, shopping centers, domestic noise ingression studies, architectural acoustics with the audio and software to put things through there. And Robin McKenzie Partners did the acoustical treatment for us. And we've also conducted listening studies for codecs, soundscape classification, exosolar planetary sonification, auditory interfaces, active noise cancellation, Foley, and so on, as well as mixed double use for audio guides, iBooks, apps, teaching, radio, those type of things. And I've managed, unlike a normal class, to finish 4 minutes early. So, does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask? Right, so nominative determinism sounds pretty much subject to bias. In fact, to some extent, one can read it as a cultural bias directed approach. What's your ethical view of that? A model perpetuating existing issues. Okay, right. Yes, the so I think you mean nominative determinism as in the name. Yes, there are absolutely perpetuating issues from there. And what we're doing is that's only as the initial starting point. So that it's a continuous cycle. So when we're at all unsure, it'd be gender neutral voice and an age neutral voice. But at the moment we're doing online studies to find out if there is a relationship between the two and how comfortable people are at that. Okay. So the only existing issues that would be perpetuated would be the ones based on the individual choices that somebody made, and the voice and the personality type would only be for that particular user anyway. Where at no point are we proposing that we design all robots based on what a particular group gives it as its perceived gender. I remember being in one meeting where my head of school, a dean at the time, we were talking about Siri, and the person who did the voice of Siri follows me on Twitter, and I thought it was fantastic that a woman's voice was the voice of Siri, because to me Siri is an amazing technology, especially back in 2011, that promoted women as having being the fountain of all knowledge, whereas entirely rightly, and something I'd never ever considered at all prior to her mentioning this, was that she got very, very annoyed and justifiably saying that no, Siri is a servant and it's just perpetuating this women as servile. So the reason for the nominative determinism is just as a very initial starting point, so we at least got a first best guess, which then adapts over time about how comfortable or uncomfortable somebody is with a particular device. So simple things like measuring the presence frequencies. Is the person talking to the robot or with the robot, or are they talking away from it? Are they looking at the robot? How full are the requests, or are they quite perfunctory, and so on, and continuously cycling through so that until we find what's right. So good. So any other questions? Anything people would like? We've still got 10 minutes. Any particular project that anyone would like to know more about, or? Right, so through the Auralisation suite, do you also create urban sounds and urban open spaces? How can these sounds or binaural recordings be amalgamated into virtual augmented reality? Yes, we use the Xelia ZM1 and the portable recorder, and we do go out and record real-world environments. Originally, I started with an eight-channel Omni setup as a cube, and then moved to Soundfield. The 4-capsule one, wasn't particularly happy with that. Now in Celia, which I'm much happier with. And yes, we are augmenting urban sounds in urban open spaces. We're experimenting. One field that I very much want to work into, I'm busily trying to persuade people to do, but yet to get any takers for it, is we've been experimenting with the ultrasonics, basically I forget what it's called. I should remember this. The military weapon in sound. So please somebody type it in if they can remember what it's called. Anyway, it's the one that the military used to force people's hands up into flares to cover their ears. Anyway, it'll come back to me. We use those to bounce sound off buildings, and so we can create localized sound, and it works incredibly effectively. We've been using it along with data projections, but I really want to take that much further. That's for the shared experiences. For the personal experiences, there we go. No, so somebody hasn't. Anyway, so we use that to bounce the sound off the buildings. We also use augmented reality to get, so when you're a specific location or oriented in a certain way, that you are augmenting the outside world. So yes, okay. Yes, I don't know where it will be found on YouTube, but if you send me an email, as soon as I know, I will send you that link. Okay, so binaural recordings. How can these sounds or binaural recordings be amalgamated into virtual reality, virtual augmented reality? Okay, well, it's relatively simple. Oh, first of all, binaural, we don't. I know I've got the Neumann, but we don't tend to record in binaural. We tend to that particular the Neumann K100 tends to be just my ears in the room because I'm in the control room. I have that in the room with somebody else, along with spectro to monitor and other meters to monitor what's going on, so I can have a sense of spatiality of what's going on. What we tend to use is we'll use the ambisonics and then convert it to binaural, so we've got the head tracking. And that way, when we've got that, we can relatively accurately overlay an auditory object in a real world, in an urban open space. And the beauty of that is, again, why so many people love their own HRTF models, drunk the Kool-Aid, is that we have that ability to learn a particular model. It's like when you jump on a different pair of headphones, then it sounds very different at the start, and then after a wee while we forget how different it sounds. So people do learn what that model is, and the more accurate the head tracking, the better and the faster they are at learning that, or where a sound is coming from. And as I said, we use the volume control to affect how loud the augmentation is over the background sound. Oh, there's quite a few questions coming. I'm not scrolling up, sorry. All right, okay. Have you worked with building up soundscapes from simulations? Yes, I'm not a big impulse response fan, but we definitely built up believable soundscapes, so much so that when blindfolded people took part, did work way back in the 2010s, something, or even earlier than that. We got people convinced that they were in an entirely separate room, and people convinced that they're outdoors when they're indoors, things like that. So yes, we have built out realistic soundscapes. So for any information how effective existing HRTF could be measured based on user feedback. Yeah, it's so for the version that we're just using just now is they've got the Vive Pros and the ones, and they mark where the sound is coming from, and we're building that. So we're running experiments just now on that, and it's based on user feedback. So Valentino. Okay, do you know of any particular study about sound design and counter conditioning treatment for misophonia? Not off the top of my head, but I will find some and speak to you later, Valentino. Marta, and immersive music and working on VR project, the Abertay. Yep, any chance you set up work on HRTF optimization? Yes, we could definitely do that in the future. Bill, I'm just speeding up because we've got 4 minutes. Can you elaborate on something you mentioned early on, designing for hearing loss as opposed to hearing aids? Were you referring to acoustical design, lower reverb times, or other concepts? Everything, actually. We're talking about a new project 2 weeks ago about specifically for women going through menopause and women who are pregnant, to design environments acoustically better for them, but also to the auditory technologies that they're working for, making compensations for the increased cognitive load that they're experiencing at the time, or other issues that they're having. So we're doing acoustical design and augmented reality at the same time. Are personalized experiences possible in shared AR using speakers? Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we've got ultra directional sounds just now, so That can track where you are. It's been done for theatre for at least 10 years now, where you wear a tracker, and based on your position, it adjusts the delays on your microphone to make sure it's in phase with everyone else. We can do that in reverse with speakers as well. We can also just pop a smartphone in your chest or take the output from your always on mic and have that, and embed watermarks within the sound. That's a different project I'm working on in here, so that we know what you're listening to, what you're being exposed to, and the relative intensity from the different drivers. So the watermarks are inaudible and have been used by radio for decades. So it's an old technology. So about the Auralisation suite, can the sound of the Auralisation affect our thinking as if the sound is like reality that is being experienced? Yes, it has. In some people, it is absolutely thing. So Marta, if you remember to email me, because I'll forget. Right, and my email is i.mcgregor@napier.ac.uk. Okay, right. Any other questions? Please feel free. Anything I haven't answered properly? No? Well, then thank you very much for attending. In research, I love collaborating or just chatting. So please feel free to reach out if you want to discuss anything, or ask me a question, or just ask for clarification about something. And I hope that you all get a chance for a holiday over this winter period, and everyone's safe and well. Thank you very much. Bye.